When Darkest Dungeon was first released in early access in 2015, it was a minor miracle. The tactical RPG design, the horror setting, the stress system, and especially the sound and narration combined to create an instant classic. It's a tough act to follow, but Darkest Dungeon 2, now in early access, gives it a worthy shot. The good news is that this sequel has a different enough structure and technical improvements that it more than justifies its existence, taking the original formula in surprising new directions. The less good news is that there are some pretty significant tweaks that seem necessary before it can really hold a torch to the original.
Steady yourself.
The biggest change between Darkest Dungeon and Darkest Dungeon 2 is that the sequel shrinks the story, both of the campaign directly and the one that you tell yourself over the course of a run. The whole expedition consists of 4 characters in a single wagon as it travels through a handful of hostile territories, occasionally upgrading as it goes. That means that instead of a 100-hour campaign as in the original, the sequel's campaign takes place over the course of 5 or 6 hours, with 5 campaigns promised in the interface.
At last, the great ziggurat. Temple of failure and regret.
This makes it a lot easier to jump in and out of a run, but I personally miss the feeling of strategically managing a large team of characters. The tighter scope makes it overall less exciting, even if it is more manageable. On the plus side, the smaller campaign lets Darkest Dungeon 2's characters feel like distinct individuals instead of faceless classes or cogs in the machine. Getting to see each character's backstory and flashbacks that occasionally have little combat puzzles in them does a lot to flesh them out.
She delighted in the combative debate, and behind her bookish glasses, reveled in their outrage.
Another way that Darkest Dungeon 2 diverges from its predecessor is by having your party members become friends or enemies across the course of a run. Health and sanity meters still exist, but each character also has a bar representing their relationship with each other member of the party. When those meters fill up with either positive or negative emotion, that triggers a friendship or rivalry that comes with buffs and debuffs, or even gives certain extra combat actions. And if someone has a stress meltdown, it damages their relationships with everyone in the group. The net effect is that high stress makes relationships fall apart, triggering a cascade of negative feelings. On paper, this seems like a good idea. What Darkest Dungeon 1 did for the individual effects of stress turning people paranoid or cowardly, Darkest Dungeon 2 does for small group dynamics. However, balance and structural issues threaten to derail everything. The first issue is conceptual. A 4-person party means 6 different relationships within that party, on top of everybody's individual health and stress bars. Fracturing that central mechanic across several different meters makes it feel less important overall when things go wrong, in addition to being harder to track. The other problem is that right now in early access, it's just not especially well balanced. If you want to manage your party's stress level, you pretty much have to upgrade a single specific skill at the start of a run and then spam it. Alternatively, I found it pretty easy, at least early in a run, to simply fight my way past the bad relationship debuffs. They're annoying, certainly, but they're not run-ending. Those factors combine in a way that removes the signature tension that the original Darkest Dungeon created. Should I flee this run, or should I try to fight on? Because a run in Darkest Dungeon 2 is a single multi-hour progression, there's no ability to bail and only get partial rewards for the current set of characters. You're either going forward, or you're totally starting over. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just much less intense overall, for good and for ill.
There are yet places such as this, where a little light still gathers.
Still, Darkest Dungeon 2 is a very strong moment-to-moment game. Combat is largely the same as it was in its predecessor. It's a one-dimensional tactics game where you face monsters on a line and use appropriate skills to bash, weaken, and zap them based on positioning. What's dramatically improved, however, are the models and animations. The characters move and sway and prepare to attack when you start clicking on different combat skills. And yet it maintains the excellent visual style of the original. The sound and music are also top-notch once again. Looking forward, I'm curious what the 4 future campaigns foreshadowed by the menu will change outside of their boss encounters in order to keep the moment-to-moment gameplay novel. There's also a lot of room to grow the list of characters since there are currently only 9. All in all, the early access version offers a decent amount of content that took me 5 or 6 tries over the course of almost a week to play through, which is respectable, although very different from its epic-length predecessor.
Each milestone makes the next road just a little easier.
In the first days of its early access launch, Darkest Dungeon 2's new mechanics, 3D art, and other ideas already separate it from its predecessor enough that it has a strong reason for existing, and the road trip campaign structure keeps it tight and focused, without retreading too much of the same ground. But that smaller focus also means that a lot of the magic from the sprawling original seems to have been lost. Strong foundations are potentially there, but it'll take some work to build something miraculous upon them. For more, check out our reviews of Disciples Liberation and Astria Ascending, and for everything else, stick with IGN.